When we talk about expanding consciousness, the very first step is deceptively simple but incredibly powerful. It begins with awareness. And by awareness, I don't just mean the ability to notice what's happening outside of you, but the skill of turning inward and recognizing what's unfolding in your own mind. Most of the time, we're on autopilot. We wake up, grab our phone, go through routines, react to things, and fall asleep without really paying attention to what just happened. Our thoughts come and go like waves, and instead of noticing them, we often get swept away by them. Awareness is about stepping off that conveyor belt of automatic living and finally observing the machinery of your own mind. Now, this may sound abstract, but it's actually very practical. Think about a time when you were frustrated in traffic, or maybe someone said something that instantly triggered you. Without awareness, the emotion hijacks your nervous system and dictates your response. But with awareness, there's a pause. That pause is where choice lives. You notice I'm angry, my chest feels tight, my jaw is clenching. Just that observation changes the trajectory of what happens next. Instead of being dragged into an argument or carrying that stress into the rest of your day, you've created a small but powerful space between stimulus and response. That space is the doorway into higher consciousness. Awareness is also about recognizing the subtle patterns you live by. We all have stories we tell ourselves about what we're capable of, about who we are, about what the world is like. Some of those stories are useful, but many are inherited scripts we never chose. Without awareness, they run silently in the background, shaping our choices and limiting our potential. The moment you bring awareness to them, you shine light on the hidden architecture of your mind. You start to ask, is this belief really mine? Or is it something I absorbed from my upbringing, from culture, from fear? And once you see it clearly, you can decide if it still deserves a place in your life. Science has shown that awareness actually rewires the brain. Practices like mindfulness and meditation strengthen neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for regulation, decision-making, and perspective. They reduce activity in the amygdala, the region tied to fear and reactivity. In other words, awareness isn't just some philosophical ideal. It's a trainable skill with measurable biological effects. By paying attention, you're literally reshaping your brain to operate from a higher level of consciousness. And it's not about sitting in a cave or spending hours in silence. Awareness can be practiced right here in daily life. When you're drinking your morning coffee, actually taste it instead of scrolling through notifications. When you're speaking to someone, really listen instead of rehearsing your next reply. When you notice your mind racing, take a breath and simply watch the thoughts pass by. Small moments like these accumulate, and they begin to shift the entire texture of your experience. You're no longer just surviving through your days. You're living them with presence. The remarkable thing about awareness is that it scales. At first, it's noticing your breath or your emotions. Then, it expands to noticing patterns in your behavior, the ways you respond to stress, the cycles of thought that keep repeating. Eventually, that awareness grows to encompass how you show up in relationships, in work, in your community. You begin to see the ripple effects of your choices, and with that recognition comes responsibility. Awareness is what transforms living from an unconscious routine into a conscious creation. The truth is, you can't expand your consciousness without first learning to witness it. You can't grow beyond the limits of your current mind if you're not even aware of what's in there. Awareness is the foundation, the root from which all deeper practices and insights emerge. Without it, the rest is just noise. With it, everything becomes possible. And so, the journey begins not with changing who you are, but with finally noticing who you've been all along. If awareness is the first doorway into expanding consciousness, then the next step is learning how to anchor yourself in the present moment. Because the truth is, awareness without presence is fragile. You might notice what's happening, but unless you know how to bring yourself fully into the now, The pull of the past and the anxiety of the future will keep dragging you away. Expanding consciousness requires that you learn how to hold your attention here, where life is actually happening. We live in a world designed to scatter our attention. Notifications, deadlines, constant noise, our nervous systems are bombarded from the moment we wake up. The human brain evolved to track threats and opportunities in the environment, but in the modern age, that same wiring is being hijacked by endless distractions. And when our attention is fragmented, our consciousness shrinks. We're living in pieces, always elsewhere, never really here. Being present doesn't mean ignoring the past or never planning for the future. It means recognizing that the only place you can truly experience life, make decisions, and shift your state of mind is in this moment. Think about it. Regret lives in the past, worry lives in the future, but clarity, choice, and growth can only exist now. The present moment is like a training ground for consciousness. The more you strengthen your ability to stay here, the more expansive your awareness becomes. One of the most direct ways to cultivate presence is through the breath. It's always available, always happening in real time. When you bring attention to the inhale and the exhale, you interrupt the loop of thought pulling you into yesterday or tomorrow. In fact, research shows that slow, deliberate breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, calming the body and quieting the mind. That's why even a few deep breaths can change the way you perceive a situation. It's not magic, it's biology. Presence is embodied through physiology, but breath is just one doorway. You can train presence in the simple act of observing. Next time you're outside, instead of rushing past your environment, stop and notice the detail in a leaf, the texture of the air, the sounds you usually filter out. Or when you're with someone, really listen, not half, distracted, not planning your response, but fully tuning into the words, the tone, the emotions underneath. These micro moments of full attention are how presence becomes a habit. And it's important to understand that presence isn't passive. It's not about drifting into a blissful state where nothing matters. It's an active, deliberate practice. It requires discipline to pull your attention back again and again when it wanders. At first, it feels like work, but over time, that muscle of attention grows stronger. And as it does, you notice something incredible. The more present you are, the more alive everything feels. Food tastes richer, conversations go deeper, even challenges become opportunities because you're not lost in reaction. You're grounded in awareness. Presence also changes the way we process time. When you're absent, days blur together and life feels like it's slipping by unnoticed. When you're present, time stretches. A single hour can feel meaningful and expansive because you're actually inhabiting it. That shift in perception is one of the most profound signs that your consciousness is expanding. You're not racing through life anymore. You're actually living it. It's worth saying that the mind will always try to wander. That's its nature. The goal isn't to stop thoughts, but to recognize when they've pulled you away and to gently bring yourself back. Each time you do, you're strengthening presence the same way lifting a weight strengthens muscle. Over time, this practice becomes second nature. When you cultivate presence, you reclaim your life from the grip of distraction, regret, and worry. You discover that everything you've been searching for, peace, clarity, connection, wasn't out there in some distant future. It was always waiting for you right here. And so, the expansion of consciousness isn't about chasing another time or place. It's about finally arriving in the one moment you truly have. Now, once awareness has been awakened and presence has been cultivated, the next step in expanding consciousness is turning toward the beliefs that shape the very framework of our lives. Because the truth is, we don't just see the world as it is. We see it through the lens of the stories and assumptions we've inherited. And many of those stories aren't ones we chose. They were handed down to us by family, culture, circumstance, or even by moments of pain we never questioned. Think about it this way: your beliefs are like the operating system of your mind. They run silently in the background, dictating how you interpret reality, how you respond to challenges, and what you believe is possible for yourself. If you've been programmed with limiting beliefs, ideas like "I'm not good enough," or "people can't change," or "success is for others, not for me," then those scripts quietly narrow your consciousness. They confine you to a smaller version of yourself. The powerful thing is this: beliefs aren't fixed. They feel solid, but they're not stone. They're more like scaffolding that can be dismantled, examined, and rebuilt. But the first step is to actually question them, to pause and ask, where did this belief come from? Is it really true? Or have I simply repeated it for so long that it feels like truth? That act of inquiry cracks open the rigid walls of the mind and lets new possibilities in. Science backs this up. Cognitive neuroscience shows that the brain forms predictive models of reality based on past experience. Essentially, your brain is always guessing what's about to happen, and those guesses are shaped by your beliefs. If you believe you're incapable, your brain literally filters out opportunities that contradict that belief. If you believe you're resilient, your brain scans the environment for solutions instead of obstacles. What you believe becomes the lens through which your nervous system operates. Change the belief, and you change the range of your perception. The challenge is that many of our deepest beliefs aren't even conscious. They live beneath awareness, like roots beneath the soil. You only notice them when you look at the fruits they bear, patterns that keep repeating in your life. For example, if you keep sabotaging opportunities, maybe there's a hidden belief that you don't deserve success. If relationships keep collapsing in the same way, maybe there's a hidden script about trust or worthiness running the show. Awareness of the pattern is the doorway. Questioning the belief is the breakthrough. And questioning doesn't mean tearing everything down or living in constant doubt. It means holding beliefs lightly, like tools instead of chains. Some beliefs empower us, like the conviction that effort matters, that growth is possible, that meaning can be found even in struggle. Those are worth strengthening. Others diminish us, keeping us small or fearful. Those are worth dissolving. One practical way to do this is to test your beliefs against reality. Let's say you believe, "I'm terrible at speaking in front of people." Instead of taking that as truth, experiment. Try speaking in a small, safe setting, notice what happens, and gather evidence. Often, the data we collect from real life undermines the negative belief and forces the brain to update its model. Step by step, the scaffolding shifts. It's also worth surrounding yourself with perspectives that challenge your world view. Read books from people who have lived completely different lives. Have conversations with those who think differently. Travel, if you can, not just to new places, but into new ways of seeing. Each time you do, your mind expands, because you realize the beliefs you thought were universal are often just cultural or personal defaults. The more you question, the more you realize that belief is not a prison. It's a choice, and once you see that, you stop being trapped by old narratives and start authoring new ones. Consciousness expands when you realize that the stories you tell yourself about yourself are not final. They're drafts you can revise. So the question becomes, are you living inside a belief system that limits you, or one that liberates you? Because the boundaries of your consciousness will always be the boundaries of your beliefs. And the moment you dare to question them, those boundaries begin to dissolve. Once you begin to question your beliefs and loosen the grip of those inherited patterns, you open up space for something essential: the expansion of consciousness through knowledge and experience. Because awareness and presence give you the tools to observe your inner world, but it's exposure to new ideas, challenges, and perspectives that stretches the edges of that world. Consciousness doesn't grow in isolation. It expands every time you step beyond the familiar. Think about the brain for a moment. It's not a static organ. It's constantly reshaping itself in response to what you feed it. When you learn a new skill, encounter an unfamiliar culture, or wrestle with a challenging idea, your brain literally lays down new neural connections. That's neuroplasticity in action, the capacity of the brain to rewire itself based on experience. So when people say things like, "travel broadens the mind," or "books change your life," That's not just poetry, it's biology. Exposure reshapes the nervous system, and in doing so, it reshapes consciousness. Consider the power of reading. A single book can pull you into a perspective you never would have imagined on your own. You might be sitting in your room, but through words you step into the mind of a philosopher from centuries ago or someone living on the other side of the world. That shift stretches your capacity to understand reality, to empathize, to see beyond your immediate circumstances. In the same way, conversations with people whose experiences are vastly different from your own create cognitive dissonance, a healthy kind of discomfort that forces you to expand. But it's not just about absorbing knowledge, it's about lived experience. You can read about resilience, but until you've gone through a difficult season in your life and found strength you didn't know you had, the concept remains abstract. You can study creativity, but until you take the risk of putting your own ideas into the world knowing they might fail, you don't really understand what it means to innovate. Consciousness expands through friction, through the resistance of real life pressing against your assumptions and stretching you past them. One of the mistakes many people make is seeking only comfort, avoiding anything that disrupts their sense of certainty. But comfort zones are like echo chambers for consciousness. They repeat the same patterns, the same thoughts, the same experiences. Nothing new emerges there. Growth, by definition, requires stepping into the unknown where you're not fully in control. That uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it's also fertile ground. It's where the brain is forced to adapt and where awareness sharpens because you can't rely on autopilot. Nature itself is a teacher of this principle. Think about how trees grow. The rings that mark each year of growth are thick in easy seasons, but in harsh years, drought, storm, cold, the rings are tighter, stronger. In the same way, our consciousness expands most when we're stretched by experience, when we're pushed to adapt, when we face something that demands we become more than we were before. And this doesn't mean chasing extreme situations or dramatic adventures. Sometimes the most profound expansion comes from small but deliberate acts of exposing yourself to newness. Try learning a skill that intimidates you. Sit with someone whose perspective makes you uncomfortable and actually listen. Take a different route home. Volunteer in a setting that challenges your assumptions. Each of these is a micro expansion, and over time they accumulate, reshaping the very way you see yourself and the world. The beauty of knowledge and experience is that they also feed back into awareness and presence. The more perspectives you've encountered, the easier it becomes to step out of rigid thinking. The more challenges you've lived through, the more grounded you become in the present moment, because you know you can handle it. Consciousness isn't a straight line. It's a spiral where each layer builds on the others, pulling you deeper and wider at the same time. So if you want to expand your consciousness, don't just turn inward, reach outward, read voraciously, travel widely if you can, challenge yourself, expose yourself to the unfamiliar. Every new experience, every piece of knowledge, is like oxygen for the mind. Because consciousness grows in direct proportion to the size of the world you're willing to step into. When you've built awareness, anchored yourself in presence, questioned your beliefs, and expanded through knowledge and experience, there's another dimension of consciousness that reveals itself, connection with nature and the larger universe. Because no matter how intelligent, ambitious, or self-aware we become, our consciousness is still limited if it remains trapped inside the boundaries of the individual self. Expansion requires dissolving those walls, even if only for moments, and remembering that we're part of something much larger than ourselves. Think about what happens when you walk into a forest, or stand at the edge of the ocean, or look up at the night sky. For a few seconds, the noise of the mind quiets, the problems that felt overwhelming shrink in scale. The sense of being at the center of everything gives way to a realization you're one small part of a vast, interconnected system. That shift in perspective is not just poetic, it's physiological. Research shows that being in natural environments lowers cortisol, steadies heart rate, and even increases activity in brain regions linked to empathy and creativity. Nature regulates our nervous system, but it also expands our awareness by pulling us beyond the narrow focus of me and into the larger field of we. This sense of connection is crucial because consciousness that revolves only around the self tends to contract. It gets stuck in cycles of worry, craving, and comparison. But when you step into the rhythms of nature, when you begin to sense the patterns of life unfolding all around you, something profound happens. You realize you're not separate. You're not isolated. You're part of a living system that extends far beyond your body or your lifetime. That recognition alone can dissolve anxiety, soften rigid beliefs, and open new dimensions of awareness. It's interesting that many ancient traditions, whether spiritual, philosophical, or indigenous, always placed humans in relationship with nature. They saw rivers, mountains, stars, and seasons not as background scenery, but as active participants in shaping consciousness. Modern life often disconnects us from that. We build walls, we chase screens, we live under artificial light. And when that connection fades, so does the reminder of scale, humility, and belonging. But the good news is that the connection is never truly lost. The moment you step outside and let yourself be fully present in nature, it begins to return, and you don't need grand landscapes to experience it. You can notice the details of a single tree, the song of a bird, the way sunlight changes across the course of a day. The key is attention. The more you pay attention, the more you see that life is happening everywhere, constantly, in a web that includes you but doesn't revolve around you. That recognition stretches consciousness because it pulls you out of the illusion of separateness. There's also a deeper lesson in aligning with natural rhythms. In nature, growth is never linear. It comes in cycles, seasons of expansion, seasons of rest, seasons of loss, seasons of renewal. When we sync with that rhythm, we realize consciousness grows in the same way. There are times to push outward and times to turn inward, times to let go and times to build. Fighting those rhythms creates resistance. Aligning with them creates flow. This sense of connection also opens the door to awe. Awe is one of the most powerful emotional states for expanding consciousness. It arises when we encounter something so vast it transcends our usual frames of reference, like seeing the Milky Way or watching a thunderstorm roll in. Studies show awe literally alters perception of time, increases generosity, and reduces the focus on the self. In other words, awe shrinks the ego and expands the field of awareness. When you allow yourself to experience connection with nature and the universe, you tap into something timeless. You recognize that your consciousness is not just a private experience sealed inside your skull. It's part of a greater tapestry of life, woven into the very structure of existence. That realization doesn't erase your individuality, but it reframes it. You see yourself not as the whole story, but as a chapter in a story so vast it stretches beyond imagination. And in that recognition, consciousness expands in a way nothing else can. Because the moment you feel your life as part of the universe itself, you realize expansion was never about you alone. It was about belonging all along. Up to this point, we've talked about awareness, presence, questioning beliefs, stretching through knowledge and experience, and connecting to something greater through nature and the universe. But all of these dimensions of consciousness point toward one final, essential element: living with intention and purpose. Because expansion without direction can become scattering, awareness, presence, knowledge, they give you more energy, more clarity, more possibility. But the question becomes, what do you do with it? Where do you aim it? Without purpose, expanded consciousness is like light without a lens. It shines everywhere but doesn't focus. With purpose, that same light becomes powerful enough to cut through anything. Purpose doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. It doesn't mean you need to solve every problem in the world or carry the weight of humanity on your shoulders. Purpose simply means aligning your actions with values that matter deeply to you. It's asking yourself, what do I stand for? What is worth dedicating my time, my energy, my life to? When you live with intention, every choice, every effort becomes infused with meaning. Consciousness expands not just outward, but forward. It's directed, it moves, it creates impact. Science even shows that people who live with a sense of purpose enjoy greater resilience, better health outcomes, and longer lifespans. Purpose regulates stress, strengthens motivation, and anchors people in times of uncertainty. The nervous system interprets purpose as stability. It gives the brain a framework for understanding why effort matters, why discomfort is worth enduring. Purpose transforms struggle into growth, chaos into direction, but intention doesn't appear out of nowhere. It requires reflection. You have to ask the hard questions. What truly matters to me? Where have I been living on autopilot? Am I chasing goals that were handed to me by others, or am I choosing goals that align with who I really am? That reflection can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary because without it, you may succeed in building a life that doesn't actually feel like yours. Expanding consciousness means being awake enough to notice whether the path you're walking is truly your own. Once you begin to clarify intention, everything else aligns. Awareness sharpens because you know what to look for. Presence deepens because you're no longer scattered, you're grounded in meaning. The beliefs you question are no longer abstract, you're filtering them based on whether they serve your purpose or not. The knowledge you seek and the experiences you pursue become fuel for a direction that matters. Even your connection to nature and the universe becomes a source of guidance, reminding you that your purpose is not isolated, but woven into something larger. Living with intention also means recognizing that purpose is not static. Just like consciousness, it evolves. What felt like your guiding mission 5 years ago may no longer fit who you are today. That's not failure, that's growth. The key is to keep revisiting, keep realigning, keep asking, does this still serve the deepest part of me? Purpose is less about a fixed destination and more about a compass, something that keeps pointing you toward alignment even as the terrain shifts. And purpose doesn't just elevate you, it ripples outward. When you live with intention, your actions impact others in ways you may never fully see. A kind word, a moment of presence, a decision to act with integrity. These moments plant seeds in the consciousness of others. Expansion is contagious. When people see you living with purpose, it challenges them to wake up to their own. In this way, your growth fuels collective growth. At the end of the day, expanded consciousness is not about escaping life. It's about engaging with it more fully. It's about bringing all the awareness, presence, courage, and connection you've cultivated into each decision, each interaction, each step forward. It's about living deliberately so that when you look back, you know your life wasn't just something that happened to you. It was something you actively created. Because the true expansion of consciousness is not just seeing more, it's living more and living it on purpose.